when you vote, do you take into account the person's faith?
I would say...
And what do you think about doing that?
I would say not typically.
Because that seems to be pretty big in the U.S.
I would say I'm looking more as to how they're going to, the types of things they're going to support, and whether or not they're going to uphold the values that I uphold, or defend the Constitution as I think it should be defended. So, you know, and I think back in presidential elections, and I wasn't old enough, of course, but when John F. Kennedy, he was a Catholic. Do I always believe in what Catholics believe? Not necessarily, but that doesn't mean that he's not a good leader, and he couldn't lead our country to greatness and you know, uphold moral and ethical values. So I'm not judging him whether he did or not. I'm just saying that, you know, that's an example of whether, you know, that probably wouldn't enter in for me. And so when you have somebody like Mitt Romney, who is a
I've been asked if
a Mormon,
I would vote for a Mormon.
Well, I don't see it as a huge deal, and I would not vote for somebody just because of that. But underlying that, what kind of values and you know, he seems to be strong on family values. That's important. Yeah. So, you know, other social types of things, but more than that, how is he going to deal with things politically? For example, is he quick to just jump into war? Well, you know, I have a problem with that. I think that putting our Americans in harm's way for just the drop of a hat is a concern of ours. Yeah. And the Constitution says that Congress shall declare war. And of course, we haven't declared war.
There's been a few times where there's been military deployment without Congress.
Oh, more than a few times.
Yeah,
and in fact,
it seems like it's the new thing.
The last time we declared war is World War II.
Yeah.
When the Japanese attacked.
Even Korea didn't count. Yeah, that was a UN resolution, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah. Congress never declared it. They may have supported it without action, but you know, the thing is, the Constitution says
they can vote the defense budget.
Exactly.
That plays a big role. You were going to say something about the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution says that Congress shall declare war. So if we're going to go to war, I believe that Congress should declare it, and then what happens as a result of all that, the people get behind it, and we support it, and it's a judgment call. It's a moral judgment that we've made, and that's that protection. Whereas if we don't declare war and we just go and try to be the police of different nations and try to set up our values in their culture and country and whatever, that's just a recipe for disaster.
I read recently the Obama administration's the Obama Doctrine is what they called it. The idea of using special forces and drones and taking care of something specifically on a day-to-day basis, going in for several hours or a day and getting back out. Not what we've seen as in one war and a half capability, that sort of thing. Pulling away from that and moving with this new idea. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's hazardous territory, and the reason is because, again, we go, I mean, how would we view that if France, for example, would come into the United States and hit and run? I mean, that would be viewed as an act of war. And
they did it in Pakistan to get bin Laden.
Yeah.
And Pakistan hasn't been very friendly since.
Exactly. And you know, the Constitution does allow for, we don't use the term anymore, but mark of reprisals. It's a mark of reprisal where if you have someone like Osama bin Laden that needs to be taken out because he is a threat, in particular, not as a nation, but as he's a threat to
an individual person.
Yeah. Then, again, the Constitution allows for that, but again, it's an act of Congress. that should provide for that. And of course, we don't use those terminologies anymore. But again, that's not because it's outdated. It's just the term has changed, but it doesn't. It's still applicable. And should Osama bin Laden been taken out? Well, I don't know. Probably, but it's one of those things that could have been handled constitutionally, and then maybe diplomatically we could have handled that a little bit
At the same time, you have to trust your allies to be able to handle it diplomatically. That seems to be an issue in that area, whether it's Afghanistan or Pakistan or even Iraq.
Yes.
I met an Iraqi once, talked about it. It was pretty interesting. Talked about it's no problem between Sunni and Shia Muslims, it's a problem between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
It's a complicated issue, and it's the same way with the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's a very complicated, oftentimes spiritual dynamic involved in it, and for us to expect...
it's a holy land for both.
Exactly.
Well, actually for all three main religions from the area, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, in historical order. And
so for us to be involved in saying, well, if you give up this piece of land, it'll solve everything. Well, it's more complicated.
Depends on which group you're talking about.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that, and it's so I really believe that it's not something that's easily solved, and I don't know if we'll ever see it solved.
There's a book called The Green Prince. It's the son of one of the founders of Hamas, who was working for this really secret service, and who kept a few attacks from happening. And he became a Christian, moved to California, left all that, but he says the only hope for that conflict is for the Jewish and Muslim identities, I guess, to sort of disappear and Christians to take up a peaceful side on both ends. It's kind of more complicated than that, but...
Yeah, I really, I don't know. That's something it's complicated.
That's not something you hear very often.
And nobody has a clear, definitive answer, or obviously that person would be making a lot of money and helping the situation
A lot of
out.
people have definitive answers, they just might not be the right ones.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's complicated. And
you can ask an Arab-hating Israeli soldier or a Jewish-hating Palestinian, I guess, resistance fighter. Mm-hmm. They'll have solutions, but they might not be the best.
Yeah, what I often dislike, though, is that because it is complicated, and I'm not suggesting that the Israelis are lily white in what they've done and all actions that they've done, nor the Palestinians, but I get sometimes disturbed either way that, well, the Israelis are right and they should have a right to do this or that, or the Palestinians are right and they should do this or that. I just feel that it's much more complicated than that, and I think there's good people on both sides of the argument, and
in both people groups.
In both people groups.
Because unlike what Gingrich said recently, the Palestinians aren't a people. According to the definition of what a people is or a nation is, they kind of are. I mean, they meet every requirement.
There's issues on both sides, and it's complicated, and of course the sheriff,
it's got.
Solve it, so.
You're not gonna arrest anyone.
But I'm speaking about these national and political issues. I'm speaking, as a person.
Yeah, who sees these different things and thinks about them.